You're listening to the RE Social Podcast with your hosts, Andrew and Vince from OnV Invest. For more information, go to onvinvest.com.
What's up, you guys? Welcome to another episode of RE Social Podcast. And today I have Annie Dickerson. You guys might have known her from Good Egg Investments. I've actually seen it online. But Annie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here with you and your listeners.
Thank you. So for people who haven't read your books or seen you online or your podcast, can you give them like a 90-second intro?
Sure, absolutely. So the first thing to know is I never intended to get into real estate. I started out as a fourth grade teacher with Teach for America and happened to stumble into real estate through house hacking. So what happened was I was teaching. We were living in Washington, D.C., and my husband and I were in our early 20s, and we thought, we're going to be so cool. We're going to get a condo or a loft, something really trendy. But thankfully, we had a realtor talk some sense into us, and he said, yeah, be nice, but you might want to think of something a little more practical. And he said, here in DC, there's a lot of row homes. And a lot of row homes have not just one, but 2 units. And you could live in one and rent out the other. And if you play your cards right, and this is where it all changed, he said, if you play your cards right, someday you might get that to be cash flow positive. And I had never heard those words before. My parents were not real estate investors. In fact, they never even had bought a house when I was growing up. I didn't know any business owners, and I had never thought to put those words together like that, cash flow positive. And I didn't know what that meant, but I thought I want that. And so we started house hacking, collecting letters of the alphabet. So our first house was Alpha, then Bravo, Charlie, then Delta, here in the Bay Area where we are now. And then we started investing out of state because the Bay Area is very expensive. And so in the process of doing so, we were able to amass a lot more properties much more quickly than here in the Bay Area or when house hacking. And so through that process, I became obsessed with investing in properties. And it was all I could talk about whenever I got together with friends and family. And so pretty quickly, I realized, wait a second, all these friends and family, they want to invest in real estate too. But the one pattern was none of them wanted to do the work. They all had some money. They wanted to put it into real estate, but they didn't want to be a landlord. And so then I followed that thread, and that's how I found what we focus on now, which is real estate syndications or these group investments.
Okay, so I have like 50,000 questions.
Awesome. Bring it on.
Yeah, so what are row homes? What is that? Is that like spec homes?
They are. So row homes, they're very common in the Northeast because there's not a lot of space. And so they're basically townhomes. So They're individual. Yeah, they're in separate homes, but they're all connected together, smushed together. Okay,
so you got some economy of scale, so you can kind of get like a better deal because you have shared walls, right? Cool.
Right.
Yeah, that's cool. And so you said that you started buying. I'm assuming this is pre-2007.
This was actually right around. So the first house hack we did was in 2008.
Okay.
And it was a duplex in a growing area of Washington, D.C. It was actually 2 blocks away from the very first Target within the city limits. So now I can look back and say that was the path of progress. I didn't know that at the time, but we bought it out of foreclosure, and the basement had previously been a brothel. So we had to put a lot of sweat equity into it. We cleaned up the basement apartment and
black lights.
It out. Oh, yeah. The whole nine. There was all kinds of stuff going on down there.
So that was in San Fran?
No, that was in Washington, D.C. So that's where we started.
Okay. So were you living in Washington, D.C. back then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
You started your investing career there, but you were doing it as a house hack situation.
Yes, exactly.
Sorry.
So I started it out as house hacking, and I never, I started out as a teacher. Then I went into game design because I wanted to make educational games. And then I got into instructional design, creating trainings for companies. So here I was immigrant family, immigrant upbringing. I was very focused on, the straight A's, Ivy League school, climbing the corporate ladder. I was blinders on, focused on that. This real estate thing, I didn't think anything of it, honestly. It was just something that we did in the background that sort of made sense financially. I never thought it would be a real thing. It was just, we house hacked the first one. And then after a while, we saw another good deal. So we said, well, maybe we can hang on to that first one and we'll house hack the second one too. And then it just continued to snowball that way.
Nice. So I'm assuming 2008 was probably hard to get loans, no?
It was just starting to turn around. And because we were first-time home buyers, I think we got a kind of a special deal there. So we actually, that first row home, that first duplex that we bought, I think it was $480,000. And I think we put about $40,000 down, less than that, I think. Okay. So we got a good deal for being first-time home buyers.
In the 5 to 10% down range. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, they still have those programs. Yeah, that's cool. So then you and your husband had enough money saved up to just do that first deal, I assume.
Yeah. We were very frugal, even as young 20-somethings. And so he was working in tech. I was working as a teacher. I remember actually after the first 2 weeks of teaching, I was so excited to go into the teacher's lounge or look in the mailbox and get my first paycheck, my first adult paycheck. And here it was, and I ripped it apart. And it was barely over $1,000 for 2 weeks of work. And I was like, how is this? I've worked nights, I worked weekends. For 2 weeks, I get $1,000. But even with that, we were very disciplined. And so we lived on my salary. And so everything that he made, we kind of put away. And that's how we had the money to be able to invest in those early properties.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, I still work as a W-2, and I think my paycheck's only like $3,000 every 2 weeks, after taxes and 401k.
Oh yeah. No, this was like gross though. I was appalled. I was looking at this number. I was like, this can't be right. I just spent 2 weeks working harder than I've ever worked in my life. But anyway, got through it somehow.
So then tell me, I like to follow your timeline. So 2008 first duplex, you started working on it and doing all this stuff, fixing up the brothel, cash flowing business, right?
Right. Eventually.
Runs on a GRM. So then the second house, how long did it take for you to do?
So the second house actually was on the same block. And so we bought that actually we didn't waste much time. So that one we bought in 2010.
Okay, so that's pretty good. So another house situation, you can move in, low money.
Yep. Yeah. That one, the numbers weren't as good. I don't remember the exact numbers, but the market had started to come out of its shell a little bit. And so the numbers weren't as good. And then the actual property itself also wasn't as good as the first one because it wasn't fully divided into 2 units. There, you could actually go back and forth between the two. So it wasn't as desirable, but it still worked out great.
Okay. And then you had enough money to buy that one too? Because 2 years.
So we bought the first one in 2008, then 2010. And then because I went back to school to study game design, that took us to Vancouver, Canada. And what we realized when we got to Vancouver is we wanted to do the same thing with house hacking, but the real estate market is very different there because there's a lot of foreign money that comes into Vancouver. And so the real estate prices were really high, but the rental rate prices were still fairly affordable. So house hack wise, rental property wise, the numbers didn't quite pencil. And so we sat out for a few years while we lived in Vancouver. We were there about 4 years until I think 2014-ish. Mm-hmm. Then we moved to the Bay Area. And at that point, then we started again and we did 2 more house hacks in 2014 and 2016, something like that.
Mm-hmm. And then you had enough money to just buy those houses too, low money down, just moved in.
Yes.
And then
actually, I take that back. because for the first one in the Bay Area, because the prices were so high, we actually did borrow some money from my mom. So with that, we were able to get in. She actually lived with us for a period of time, so it worked out great for her as well.
She's the real OG.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, my sister is like one of my biggest investors. So yeah, she helps me out with the investment. How did you structure the deal, or she just gave you the money and just bought it?
I don't know that we did much to really structure the deal. She just kind of loaned us the money and didn't really have specific terms.
You know, there are some pros of being agents. Like,
yeah, that's right.
They never ask for money back.
Yeah,
they don't charge rent if I move back in. You know,
that's right.
Benefits. I want to hit on some of the immigrant mentality stuff later on, but I want to keep going along your timeline because I also immigrated from Asia about 17 years ago. I'm from India. So you got some of the you got about 4 properties now. We're still in the 1 to 4 unit range.
Yep.
So now, is there a particular time that you decided to jump into the 5+ units? How did that happen? Or did you buy more single family rentals?
Yeah, this is the turning point in the story, because what happened was as soon as we moved to the Bay Area, my husband got into real estate as a real estate agent. And so funny enough, I thought, well, I'm going to cross real estate off my list. We can't both be in real estate. How ridiculous would that be? And so he became an agent, and I continued to climb the corporate ladder in game design and instructional design. And a couple years in, his business was doing well. So he asked me if I would help. And so I did his website, redid his website. And in the process,
right? To be clear.
What's that?
He was just a real estate agent?
Yeah, real estate agent.
Okay.
Residential.
He's not running properties, not running underwriting, anything like that.
No, very basic, just selling houses. Yeah. But he had an interest in helping fellow newbie real estate investors, kind of like us.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew so little about marketing at the time that I did his whole website. And then I said, who's your target audience? Mm-hmm. And through that, because he wanted to help these fledgling investors, I said, well, I think there's something called content marketing. I think I need to read up on this and create some content around it. And so I started digging. That's when I discovered Bigger Pockets and started listening to all these podcasts and reading these books. And at that point, I had been out of college for about 10 years, but I had had 9 jobs in those 10 years, going from one W-2 to another, trying to find my place. And it just never quite worked out for me. But then everything came together because I saw this real estate thing. I did some back of the napkin math and I said, wait a second, are you telling me that if I just invest in X number of houses, each one cash flowing this amount per month, that I could essentially replace my salary and I don't have to work? Like it seems very common sense now, but at the time, it completely blew my mind. I had no idea. Nobody had ever shown that to me before, told me that that was possible. And so when I put that together, I said, oh my goodness, I don't have time for your business. I need to focus on this. And so at the time, my plan was just to do another house hack. But we had 2 young kids at the time. I think they were 4 and 1, around that age. And so kids come with a lot of stuff, right? They've not only the physical stuff, but they also have, schools and friends and all this stuff. And so there was just a lot to think about in terms of moving to a new neighborhood and uprooting the kids. And so I said, okay, well, maybe this house hacking thing isn't going to work anymore. And I said, well, okay, next logical step, maybe we'll invest in a single family home or a duplex that we're not living in, but still here in the Bay Area. So we started looking at that, but they are so expensive, number 1. And 2, the landlord-tenant laws are very restrictive here in the Bay Area. And I've heard so many nightmares that it was such a huge risk to take.
Okay.
So I had heard so many of these nightmare stories that it was such a huge risk for me to take to buy here in the Bay Area. So then I thought, okay, well, if not in the Bay Area, where else might I be able to invest? And so I basically pulled out a map of the whole United States. It was like middle school history all over again. So I'm looking at all the different places and I said, well, where do I want to invest if not here? And I looked at all these different markets. I came across a great book at that time. It was Dave Lindahl's Emerging Real Estate Markets. So I read up about what to look for in a market. And after a lot of research and a lot of analysis, I finally settled on Huntsville, Alabama. And I still remember the first time I talked to a broker in Huntsville. And I said, look, I'm looking to buy maybe a duplex or fourplex. What do you got? And he said, well, I've got these fourplexes. They're $200,000 each. And I said, oh, you mean for the down payment? And he said, no, the whole thing. And I'm like, you mean I can buy 4 units for $200,000? I was like, yes, please. I will take every one of those that you got. And that's how we got into Huntsville. We very quickly. What's that?
What were they bringing in rental income?
So this is the part where, okay, so it was not quite the, the 2% rule, 1% rule. So the rental rates were, I think they were about $700 or $800 for each unit. So for 4 units, you'd get,
that's pretty good.
It was decent. Yeah. It was definitely decent on paper. And that's what I learned. So these were like, I would call them C+ class assets. And even though I'd done all the analysis, just like Bigger Pockets had taught me, I had the spreadsheets and everything, and it looked good on paper, what actually happened was much different. And so because this was the first time we had invested out of state, the first time we had invested in C-class properties, invested in properties where we didn't know the tenants ourselves, it was a very different story than house hacking. And so we came up across things like theft, vandalism. We had this one guy who, he had a big dog and the property was a no pets property. And so all the neighbors complained and whatnot. So we asked him to leave, which eventually he did, but he left the dog behind and he didn't tell anybody. So then it was 3 days before anybody knew that he had left and this dog was in there. So by the time they got in there, the dog had, of course, chewed up all the drywall, the poor thing. He was okay. But
oh, nice. So luckily he didn't die. That's good.
I know. Yeah, that's good. But it was things like that we had never come across. And it culminated in this one story with this. So in Alabama, we learned they don't have to disclose everything to you about a property. And so you have to know the right questions to ask, which we didn't as newer investors. And so there were several things that we missed. And for this one property, it was a fourplex in Huntsville. And we hadn't asked about this one tenant and if she was paying and whatnot. I forget exactly. We had the rent roll, but we missed something. And so we inherited a tenant who hadn't been paying for several months already. And by the time we got her, she still wasn't paying. So several months in, we finally decide to evict her. And the day before the sheriff shows up, my property manager calls me and she says, "Oh, Annie, you sitting down?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's not a good sign." And I was like, I have young kids. I don't ever get to sit down. Just lay it on me. Tell me what it is. What's going on? And she said, "Well, the good news is this tenant left." I said, okay, that's good. And she said, "Well, the bad news, though, is that before she left, she stopped up all the sinks and the tubs in her unit. She left the water running and then she took off." And so she said, "So the bad news is by the time that anybody knew that she had left, she had flooded not just her unit, but the unit next door to that and the unit next door to that." So 3 of the 4 units in this fourplex were flooded. And that whole summer, very humid, very hot summer in Huntsville, it took many weeks for that to dry before we could even start with the repairs. And so I learned my lesson the hard way around this. And I realized that at that time with young kids, this type of real estate investing just wasn't the right fit for me.
Okay, so you realize that C plus, C minus, not a good. But we have very similar stories. I did the same thing, so we were not going to get into that. But it was way worse. They're stealing electricity, cooking math, just insane.
Ooh,
So
ouch.
you just bought that one fourplex?
No, we had about 25 units in Huntsville across.
Oh, you just bought like real fast, like 25 units or two?
Well, there were mostly fourplexes and I think one sixplex. Yeah, something like that. The first sixplex we bought, the first property we bought in Huntsville, we actually bought it sight unseen off of LoopNet of all places.
Maybe back then it was not a dumpster fire.
No, it definitely was.
Oh, it was. Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
We're a deal to die, and we got one.
When you moved on from the fourplex to the sixplex, was that like a shock? You had to bring the DSCR, the 1.25, and all of the underwriting, and then the money down and all that. Did you figure it out?
Yeah, we kind of figured it out. We had some good help with the broker we were working with, and they kind of led us through that. And I believe that actually we worked it, even though it was 6 units, we were able to get a residential loan on it because it was actually 2 separate structures.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So we were able to work out something special. I don't remember the exact details, but it wasn't until I got into syndication that I was faced with these commercial loans, which is as you know, it's a whole nother animal.
So let's go to that. So you had 24 units, mostly all single family, 1 to 4 units. And then they were all similar C kind of neighborhoods. And then you were like, you know what, I'm done with this crap. And then you're now making a decision to see what else is out there.
Well, it wasn't so much that I wanted to see what was out there, that it was more that I had in this process, I had become so passionate about this and so obsessed really that I was talking to all my friends about it and they all wanted to get in with me.
Okay.
They'd say, teach me how to do that. I want to do that too. And I'd say, yeah, pull up a chair. Let me walk you through the steps. And so I'd walk them through the steps and all the, underwriting and analysis, talking to brokers, looking at properties. And every time their eyes would just glaze over and they would say, oh, no. You misunderstand. I don't want to actually do this work. I have this pile of cash and I want to put it into real estate, but I don't want to do the work. Could you do the work for me? I'll just put my money with you on the next property. Mm-hmm. And so I had enough of these conversations that I had this aha moment. And I said, wait a second. I know all these people with the same problem and I don't know how to solve it yet, but if I could crack this nut and figure out how to help them, then I could help a bunch of people. And so that's really what led me down the path to go beyond the fourplexes and whatnot, to really find a way to help people to invest with me. And at the time I had grand plans. I thought, okay, maybe if I really stretch myself, I could do like a 10-unit property. That was like the highest I could dream of at the time. And so I thought with a 10-unit, maybe I can bring in 1 or 2 investors. I didn't know anything about syndication. I thought maybe I could do a JV. I'd heard of that before, a joint venture. I didn't know anything about it, but I thought maybe I could do something like that. And what happened was, as I started digging and started learning about how to create these partnerships, that's when the word syndication started to pop up again and again. And at first I thought, this is too complicated. I don't know what this is about. That's not for me. And then one day I thought, you know what? I'll just read up about this. I don't know anything about it. I'm curious. Let me see how this works. And as I was learning more about syndication and how it worked, I feel like my eyes just got bigger and bigger and bigger, because not only did I realize that this was the answer to my problems, but I became enraged because I thought, why didn't anybody tell me about this? I'd been investing in real estate for about 10 years at the time. And I didn't know there was an easy button for investing in real estate. I thought I had to be a landlord. I had to roll up my sleeves. I had to do the work. And when I discovered syndications, I thought, well, I got to tell everybody about this. It doesn't matter if they invest with me or not, or if they invest in syndications at all. But at the time, at least, so few people knew about syndication that I made it my mission to just tell everybody about it. And so that's kind of how I went down that path to try to get into this world of syndications.
I see. And these people you talk of, they're just family and friends?
Yeah. So mostly family and friends to start. And because I had had 9 jobs in 10 years, I had a lot more professional contacts than many people.
So you're a pretty social person then. You talk to people and
Introvert on the inside, but I try to be a little bit of a curious butterfly on the outside, I guess you could say.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So you tell me about the first deal you did with the Penplex. You raised some money. How did you structure that?
So the first deal we did, I had dreamed of doing something like a 10 to 30 or 40 unit, but it actually didn't turn out to go exactly that way. I thought I was going to do a 10 unit, let's say, all by myself. I was going to underwrite it myself. I was going to find it myself. I was going to raise the capital myself. I was going to manage the asset myself. I was going to do it all. Mm-hmm. And thankfully, the universe stepped in and said, might want to think about that because this is actually a lot of work and you might need some partners here. And so I actually, in early 2018, I quit my job without ever having done a syndication before because I was really committed to making this work. And what happened was I got an opportunity to be a co-GP, a co-general partner, and raise capital with somebody else on their deal. And at first I was very hesitant. I said, no. I don't want to bring money to your deal. I want to save my investors for my own deal. Thank you very much. But they said, you might want to just try your hand at raising capital because if you're successful, what you're telling your investors is you can give them access to these great opportunities that they might not otherwise have. And then they'll just continue coming back to you. And then you'll have more and more people, a bigger network for when you do your own deals. But that, does make kind of sense. That does make sense. And so that first deal that I participated in was well over 10 units. I can't remember the exact unit count. It was less than 200. I think it was between 150 and 200 units. So much, much bigger than what I could have done on my own. And when I first started raising capital, I really thought that raising capital would be the worst part of the deal. I thought, oh my gosh, I got to talk to people about money. How awkward is that going to be? I don't know anything about this. And then they're going to ask me all kinds of hardball questions that I won't be able to answer. But I gave it a try. I said, you know what? I'm in this for the impact. I want to help people build wealth. Let me just tell people about it. And then if they ask me a question I don't know, then I'll just say, I don't know, but I'll go help you find the answer. So I approached it that way. And I very quickly realized, how I started out as a teacher? Mm-hmm. I very quickly realized that raising capital and teaching are actually a lot more closely related than I ever thought, because raising capital is really about teaching people about these opportunities and building trust with them. And so that's what I did in those early days, is just do a lot of education, teaching people what was inside this black box of real estate syndications. And so I really just started out that way, partnering on these deals. And when my now business partner, Julie, and I got together and we started co-GPing on these deals, in those early days, we would bring maybe $500K to each deal. And then as word got out and as people were happy with their investments, then we were able to bring more and more. And now we've kind of pivoted to doing more of these joint venture deals and doing our own deals.
Oh, nice. So, okay. So the first deal you ended up was raising money for another GP, and you were co-GP in that deal.
Yes, that's right.
And so it's very basic structure split, like 70-30, and then 30 gets split between GPs, and people raising capital gets a third, and stuff like that. Very similar.
Yeah, okay. Very similar.
Cool. And then what I realized, I have a small ownership in like a 44 unit deal in Lakeland. It's basically like not even worth talking about it because that's how little I own. It's like less than 2%, I think, but it's a $6 million deal. But the reason I bring it up is I don't really get any cash flow because, as you know, with the pref and all that crap, like there's nothing in it till you sell the deal. So how are you able to like quit your job and do all that, raising funds and, being a part of the GP?
Yeah. So I wasn't just investing in them as an LP because we were on the GP side. We were getting a share of those returns. And so I'll be honest, that first year that Julie and I partnered up, this was 2018. We were part of 9 syndications that year, and we brought about 500,000 to each deal.
Wow, that's a lot of news.
It was we saw a lot of success right off the bat. But even with that, by the end of the year, I don't think either of us took home very much money. Mm-hmm. But we saw this as a proof of concept, and we said, this is working. People are coming to us. Let's keep going. So the second year, we also did, I think, 9 syndications, but now we were able to bring more money to each, probably $1 to $3 million per deal. And so at this point, we were able to start generating more in acquisition fees. Sure. It still was, it was tough because in between deals, we didn't have sustainable income. So we kind of had to do a balancing act of making sure that we had enough funds, enough of a runway to keep going. But the other thing that happened was because we saw so much success in such a short amount of time, other syndicators came to us and they wanted to know how we were doing what we were doing. And so by the end of our second year in business, we had launched a coaching program to teach other syndicators how to raise capital. And so that became our second source of income. And so that paired together with the acquisition fees from the deals that we were doing, that kind of gave us a stable base.
Have you thought about investing in real estate and taking advantage of all of those benefits without any of the work? That is something that Onvi Invest not only provides, but has been providing since its inception. With friends and family, we have built an empire in a system of a wealth generating tool that is giving us and our friends and family that leverage in their life to create true wealth. Go to onviinvest.com for more to see if you qualify. And thanks for listening.
Okay, that makes more sense. So do you hang out with Hunter Thompson and stuff? Did you ever work with him?
I know Hunter very well, and we haven't worked directly together on a deal, but I'm very familiar with him and his experience. He's a great guy.
Yeah, he does very similar. He teaches people how to raise capital, and he does that. Okay, sounds good. So a lot of capital raising. So did you transition out of not out of that, but also into acquiring properties by yourself? Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So along the way, and I'll talk about the reasoning behind that as well, because a lot of people, if they start out down this path and they start raising capital, I mean, of course, you can't just raise capital, right? There's other things that you're contributing, but if you're not in control of the deal, the plus side is you don't have as much responsibility. And so you can just focus on the parts that you really love to do. But the downside of that is if the partners that you're working with make some decisions on the deal that you don't agree with or that are not in the favor of your investors, then you really have very little say in that overall control. And so that's what we saw as we were able to bring more and more money to these deals. And we had more investors at stake in these opportunities, but we didn't have the control. Mm-hmm. So that became an issue for us. It was almost like a not a bottleneck, but a tipping point, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Where we saw, hey, we actually need to have more control to be responsible for our investors and their capital. So that was a few years ago now when we started down this path and we said, okay, now we're going to do more of these JV partnerships rather than be a co-GP in a deal with perhaps a lot of other co-GPs where we have very little say. We wanted to be the sole capital partner with one other partner in the deal. So that's kind of how we structured it. So we did a fair number of those deals, and now we're kind of moving toward doing our own solo deals. But it's been definitely a journey because at each stage, there's different risks and considerations at play.
Then at this point, you've kind of given up on just doing this, single family, just really not worth your time at this point, right?
Yeah, at this point, my kids are a little bit older now, so they're so the older one's 11, the younger one's 8. So they're a little more self-sufficient. So they can kind of, get their own snacks, no more diapers. So that all is good. So I do have a little bit more time freedom on my hands. And in fact, recently I was tempted. I was like, maybe I could try my hand at this whole rental property thing again. So it's not out of the question. I might get back to it someday, but I have my hands pretty full right now with the syndications that we do. But someday I might get back to rentals.
Yeah, that's what I want listeners to understand. It's like, real estate, we have so many different ways to make money.
So many.
And I started off with the same crap like you. I would say D, there was a D property, and then I went to C minus and then C whatever. And then I started going to a lot of conferences, and I hung out with like Jake and Gino and all these guys. And then I eventually ended up getting involved with a small syndication, and I'm a co-GP, whatever, I won 50%. A small deal. And I realized the same way like you did was I didn't enjoy it as much. It is just so much work for absolutely no control and it's not something that excited me. So I actually came back and I continued doing single family deals. What I ended up transitioning to is nicer B plus, A minus, and then furnishing that and renting it out to families for displays and doing model. So that's what I've been focused on. I might like you might go back to rental. I might do the syndication stuff. But I really enjoy doing smaller deals with I have a sister, I got my buddy's mom. Okay, 3 people.
Nice.
All right, we got $200,000. Let's go buy this $500,000.
Yeah. I think I would definitely, that's a good path. If and when I get back into it, I think I would go after, the B plus, A minus kind of properties. I think that would probably be a lot less hassle and headache than what, a C or a D property might bring. But I think it's really, it's interesting that our paths are kind of parallel, but we kind of took them in different directions. And I think that's the key is that, in real estate, there's never, or in life, really, there's no failure. There's only feedback. And so you took that feedback and decided to go one direction. I took that feedback and went a different direction. But it's about continuing to try new things and continuing to go and at each stage you might find a different fit. But the important thing is not give up on real estate as a vehicle for building wealth. Yeah,
that's really interesting. Even though it is different, but it's kind of similar, how we're doing things. Anything else you would like to add, Andy? What are you guys up to? Can you talk about how developing a podcast has really helped your business?
Yeah, absolutely. We've done all sorts of things in this business. It's like trial by fire. We started out with blogging and then videos, podcasts, webinars, events. We've tried everything. And, it all comes back to that impact that we wanted to try to reach people where they are. Again, it's that teacher in me. I wanted to make sure that wherever people were, we were meeting them where they were and bringing them the message at their level. And so I remember, early on, especially, I would type terms like capital preservation. And then I'd say, wait, delete. Protect your money. Simple things, right? Just translating the jargon into everyday language so that it's accessible for more people and on as many platforms as possible. That was really our goal. And it still continues to be what we do to this day, is to continue to try to reach out to people. And I think a big part of the message that we've been preaching is that, we love real estate. Julie and I love real estate, but we are not, at least I'm not. I don't love the spreadsheets. I don't love all the numbers, the sensitivity analyses, the IRRs, all the technical terms. That's not what I'm in this for. We've always talked about real estate as a stepping stone. And I'm sure you would agree with this, is that real estate is a stepping stone to get you from where you are to where you want to be. And for us and our investors, we always talk about this life by design. In other words, you're not living a life by default where you're blinders on, going to work 9 to 5 without really thinking about what you truly want out of life. And a life by design is when you actually pick your head up out of the sand and you say, wait a second, I've been doing this 9 to 5 thing for a while and retirement's still another 30 years away. I don't think I want to be doing this for that long. How can I do this a little bit differently? What's possible? And then you start to put the pieces together. You start to dream about what can be, and you start to put that into reality. And so real estate can be a really great tool to help you to get to that life by design. So that's what we're most passionate about.
Okay. Yeah, that is really cool. So actually, I wrote this one down earlier. I wanted to talk about this. So like with your business model, how does your, like, let's say your funnel happen? Like, are you picking up people from, your podcast, because your podcast is bigger and you reach people hit you up, and then you have a live event, and then you talk to them in person, and you have, how does that work for you?
So typically our investor journey is, a lot of people find us through 3 main sources. The top one is Google. So we have a lot, because we've put out a lot of content, it tends to start to rank when people are searching for certain things. So they find us through Google. Another source is through friends and family. So we get a lot of referrals from people, whether they've invested with us or not, but they just love our brand. They love what we're doing, and they'll refer their friends and family to us. And then the third one is podcasts, as you've mentioned. And I love podcasts because just like this, it's an opportunity for us to sit down and to have a real conversation, and a deep and a meaningful conversation about what real estate means, what it means to me, what it means to us, and how we're helping our investors through it. So really that most people find us through one of those 3 channels. And then they come into the Good Egg sphere, so to speak, where we have lots of different content and resources. We have our weekly popover events, which are these kind of drop-in office hours. We try to meet people just to, let them ask their questions or meet other investors. We have webinars, all sorts of things, all sorts of programming, just to make sure that people get the resources that they need. And then through that, usually people gain the confidence that they need to really decide whether or not this is the right path for them. And if it is, then they might move forward to invest with us.
I see. And interesting. So do you do live events too or no?
We haven't yet done our own live event. We've spoken at a number of events, but that's definitely on the docket next for us, is to host a live event.
Just like a meetup, I mean, not like a conference or anything.
Yeah, no, we haven't done a meetup of our own either. Actually, we've done small ones. Like I've hosted some investors at my house here in the Bay Area. Julie's hosted some investors. She's now based in Hawaii. And sometimes we'll do these team retreats, and we'll invite investors to come along. So smaller gatherings like that.
And then these investors are through the channels we just discussed.
Say that again?
The investors came to you through the channels we just discussed.
Yes, most of them. Yeah.
Right. That was interesting. Cool. And can you talk a little bit about your book?
Yeah. So the book, our book is called Investing for Good, and it really, it's a very short book. It's maybe 150 pages or so, and we really designed it to be something that you could read in one short airplane ride, because we wanted it to cut through the noise, because there's so much information out there that it's easy to get caught in analysis paralysis, especially if you're considering something new like syndication. You don't know who to trust, where to go for the information. So we kind of wanted to just put it all in one place for people. So in the book, I talk a lot about my own experiences investing in real estate, as well as what's possible if you were to invest. For example, there's one chapter where I talk about if you were to invest $50,000 a year for I think for 5 years or something like that, then what's possible with that trajectory of wealth. So things like that, where it's a combination of our own personal experiences as well as some case studies, some scenarios of what's possible, and then the process of actually moving forward to invest.
Wow, that's really interesting. You've done a lot of work in a short amount of time. Is there anything that you contribute to that other than you also sound very nerdy like me? I'm so good.
Definitely. That's really it, is just being totally nerdy. That's it. But I remember in those early days, when my kids were really little, we lived in this, one of the duplexes that we lived in Oakland. It was a 4-bedroom house, and our bedroom was in the way back. The living area was in the way front of the house. The kids shared a room that was right in front of ours. So it was between our room and the living room. So every morning I'd get up before the kids would get up. So I'd get up at, 5 a.m. or so, and I would tiptoe as quietly as I possibly could. Because if either of them woke up, my whole morning would be shot. But I did that every morning, and most mornings it worked. And most mornings I was working before they were up. Then I'd get them, do the whole breakfast thing, get them off to school or preschool or whatnot, and then work on the business the whole day, and then do the whole dinner rush, put them to bed, and then work until, midnight or 1 o'clock almost every day. And this passion, this energy, Julie and I talk about it all the time, is that it almost feels like this business and this idea and this passion came through us and not from us. It was almost like some higher power, call it the universe or whatever, conspired to get this thing out into the world. And we were lucky enough to be chosen to be the ones to shepherd it out into the world. But it definitely seemed like, and continues to seem like, kind of a co-creation.
Yeah. Wow, that's pretty cool. And, I have a similar, business model, but, they're just like 10 million, not like 10 billion like you guys. But, my question is, I always have a tough time with the cash flow stuff we have because, I bought a lot of properties and like I said, I like nicer areas, nicer properties. So, it's not really cash flowing. The only reason I'm able to sustain this madness is because me and my buddy Andrew, we both make 6 figures and we can eat a lot of, crap from anything, because we can spend money on the business. For a long time, we've been doing it for 6 years. We're just turning the tide this year that we're actually not losing money. But, of course, if we sell everything, we can make a couple $1 million, because that's not our goal. So for you, I want to ask you, how the cash flow is and stuff. How long did it take for you to become like cash flow positive and to get like someone to work in your stuff? We have a couple of people working, VAs in the Philippines, but it's not, that much. So how did you do that and then work that?
Yeah. And so you're talking about the cash flow for the business, not the cash flow for investors. Is that right?
Yes. I don't care about the investors part. I'm assuming
right.
Pay that. Yeah.
Yes.
Same thing. Like I pay my investors, whatever, and I'm just broke all the time.
Yeah. Sounds about right. So it was really that first year in business, we made a little bit of money, but it was just the two of us, Julie and I, working. But we were very, very busy. The second year in business, we had a little bit of a cushion. We still didn't take very much out of the business, but we had a little bit of a cushion. And because of this brand that we had built, we had this strong, robust community around us. And so somebody in our community actually reached out to ask if she could be an assistant. And so we said, okay, well, we can bring you on, but we told her the situation. But because we had built this strong brand, she really wanted to be a part of it. And so it didn't matter to her if the hours were not, the same, or if a week to week, or if she was getting, a ton of pay. She just really wanted to be a part of this. And that's where I see the strength of building a movement of a strong brand comes in, because then these people come in that really want to be part of it. And so that's what happened. Was she came in and she started out as an assistant, an admin, and she really grew over the years to be our first director of investor relations. And as she started to help us build out those systems and our investor base continued to grow, we had these great opportunities. And we had launched that coaching program for that second stream of income. We were able to build more reserves in the business. And that's when we were able to start hiring. We made a lot of mishires, I will say, along the way, because we had to learn exactly what we were looking for and how to find the right people, how to train them up, how to properly manage them. So we learned a lot along the way, but it was really in that second year of business where we were able to bring her on part-time. And then by, I would say, that third year, we were able to bring on another person. And then now we're about a team of 10.
Okay, that sounds good. It's time for you to take off because you have another call, but I have a couple of questions. Last final, I promise.
Yeah.
One is I always ask everyone is, people are always starting right now or they're trying to do the next year and there's always something going on in the world, right?
Yeah.
Since World War II, there's, something's happening. There's Vietnam War, Korean War, whatever, like it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
There's always something happening. Now there's war in Russia and Israel and, people are like, oh, the Feds haven't released the race. There's always something happening. Out of all of these things, how do you constantly keep going and invest, or are you kind of like waiting right now to see what's going on? What is your position right now?
Yeah. So I've never been good at timing the market.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I keep faith in is that the real estate market is cyclical and that it's always going to come back around and always has, no matter all these world events that you've talked about, the real estate cycle continues to go again and again. And so that's what I keep my faith in is even when it looks like the whole thing's falling apart, I think, well, this isn't going to last forever. And I ask myself, where's the opportunity in where we are? Because as you know, in every part of the market cycle, there is opportunity. You just have to know where to look. And so that's what I keep my focus on is one, knowing that it is eventually going to turn back around, and two, positioning myself to take advantage of the opportunities at whatever part of the cycle we're in.
And how do you find these opportunities? Like, how do you know when is a good opportunity, when it's not?
Oh, good question. So we have our own internal standards of what we look for. So those, we try not to compromise on those. We kind of keep those at a certain level. But then within the different parts of the market cycle, we're just always constantly talking to people, looking at what other people are doing, what other people are putting out, and using that to inform kind of our baseline of where we are and helping us to get connected to those opportunities.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. It almost feels like we need to do a part 2 sometime,
Yeah, a lot to dig into for sure.
Yeah. And let me know if you talk to just the smaller guys, I can come on the show and, talk to you about single family stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
But this is awesome. This has been great. I wanted to give you 30 seconds if you want to plug something, if you have something going on, you have an event or, and where people can find you on this.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So to find us, the easiest place to go is goodegginvestments.com. If you have any listeners who are new to the world of real estate syndications, we have a 7-day email course that goes through everything you need to know about passive investing, and that's at passiveinvesting101.com. We do have all sorts of deals currently open. We have opportunities for both accredited and non-accredited investors. For savvier investors, for newer investors, we welcome everybody because, again, our whole mission is around helping as many people as possible to really just learn about this opportunity and see if it's right for them.
Okay, cool. So you do 506C and B, looks like.
So we do 506C and crowdfunding. So the crowdfunding opportunities allow us to bring in non-accredited investors for as low as $10,000 at the minimum.
Oh, really? I'm not familiar with that. What is that?
Yeah.
One.
So it's a whole separate regulation under SEC regulations.
It's really hard to do, right? To get that.
So it does take some initial setup work, and you have to go through a third party, a special kind of a portal platform. But once you get it set up, we've been doing it. I think this is our third crowdfunding fund that we're currently doing. Once you get it set up, it's great. And it allows us to take as many non-accredited investors as we want. With 506B, you're limited to the 35, but with crowdfunding, it's called Reg CF or Regulation Crowdfunding. It's a whole separate section under SEC rules. But once you get it set up, you can really open the doors to non-accredited investors.
And they get similar returns compared to
the same exact returns as our accredited investors.
Kind of cool. Like, what is it like? IRR in the low teens or still?
Yeah, these days it's low teens. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I only pay my investors. I pay like 5% cash on cash, but they get a huge upside on the equity split. That's how I do it.
Nice. Yeah. Cool. Sounds like a good deal.
Yeah. Thanks, Andy. Thanks for coming on the show, and let's catch up soon.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yes, yeah.
I don't know about you, but I definitely like to see 5-star reviews on any service or any product before I purchase. Please take a second to leave us a 5-star review, whether you're listening to it on Apple, iTunes, or Spotify, or whatever platform. Take a second, goes a long way, helps us a lot to grow the channel, and thanks for listening.